Who actually killed Meredith Kercher? That's the question that's haunted the world for almost 2 decades. And I'm telling you right now, the answer is not as simple as it was made to look. Because the story you thought you knew about Amanda Knox, about that house in Perugia, Italy, about the headlines screaming Foxy Knoxy, that story was never the full truth. And today, we need to talk about the person who got lost in all of this, the real victim, Meredith Kercher. Because her life mattered. And too often, her name gets pushed aside like she was just a side character in her own tragedy. Picture this. A beautiful November morning in 2007. A small hillside town in Italy. College kids buzzing around, tourists sipping espresso, life feeling quiet and safe. In one apartment, though, police pushed open a door to find a horror scene so brutal it would explode into one of the biggest media storms in modern history. Meredith Kercher, only 21 years old, lay murdered, stabbed, violated, her life cut short before it even really began. And almost instantly, before the blood had even dried, the police made a decision that would change lives forever. They decided Amanda Knox, her American roommate, must be guilty. This is where things get messy, and this is where I need you to really listen. Because the truth of what happened that night is tangled up in bad police work, wild media spin, and people rushing to fit a story that would sell. And in the middle of all that noise, the reality of who Meredith was, and who really killed her, slipped out of sight. Amanda Knox, just 20 years old at the time, suddenly became the target. Think about it, she barely spoke Italian, she'd only been there a few weeks, she was goofy, awkward, and didn't cry the way police expected her to. And somehow, that was enough to decide she was suspicious. She was interrogated for more than 50 hours in a language she barely understood. Imagine that. Imagine being a scared kid in a foreign country, surrounded by cops who already think you're guilty, drilling you non-stop until you're broken. At some point, Amanda caved. She gave a false confession. She even named her own boss, Patrick Lumumba, as someone involved because police pressured her to. And once that was on paper, it didn't matter what the evidence said. The world already had its monster. And the media? They ate it up. They branded Amanda with that disgusting nickname Foxy Knoxy. Every photo of her smiling, laughing, kissing her boyfriend outside became twisted into proof that she was cold, that she didn't care. Instead of being a scared exchange student, she suddenly became cast as this femme fatale in an Italian soap opera about murder. And it worked. Newspapers sold. Headlines screamed. The world couldn't look away. But here's what didn't sell so well, the actual facts. Let me break it down. Number 1, there were no fingerprints, no DNA, no single piece of physical evidence tying Amanda Knox or Raffaele Sollecito, her boyfriend, to the murder. Number 2, what they did find, a bloody handprint and DNA inside Meredith's room, didn't match either of them. Number 3, that evidence pointed clearly to another man altogether.
That man was Rudy Guede. He was 20 years old too. He already had a sketchy history of break-ins. And his DNA was literally all over the crime scene, on Meredith's body, in her room, in the traces of violence left behind. When investigators finally ran the tests, the match was undeniable. And eventually, Rudy himself admitted he was there with Meredith that night. He tried to spin it, saying they had consensual sex. That some invisible mystery person must have done the killing. But come on. The evidence spoke louder than his words. Blood, prints, DNA. Everything fit him. And yet, Amanda and Raffaele were still locked in prison. Think about how insane that is. You have the real suspect, with real evidence, confessing he was there. But because the police needed their story about Amanda to be true, because the media had turned her into this villain already, they refused to let go of that version. Amanda and Raffaele were convicted. 26 years for her, 25 for him. And people cheered at that verdict, believing justice had been done. But all along, Meredith's family? They weren't getting the truth. They weren't getting real justice for their daughter. They were getting caught in this circus about Amanda's love life, Amanda's clothes, Amanda's personality. Years later, in 2011, Amanda was acquitted, released, and eventually fully exonerated. But you know what happened to Rudy Guede? He was sentenced to 30 years, then reduced to 16. And after only 13 years, he walked out of prison a free man. A man whose DNA was all over the murder scene. A man who has since been accused of assaulting women again. That's who really killed Meredith. That's whose actions ended her life. And yet, somehow, the world still remembers Amanda Knox's name more than Meredith's or Rudy's. And this is where the story cuts deep. Because we have to ask why? Why do we remember the accused more than the victim? Why do shows like The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox keep the spotlight on Amanda, when Meredith's story is the one that deserved to be told? Don't get me wrong, Amanda's wrongful conviction matters. What happened to her was horrifying. But Meredith Kercher was the one whose life was stolen. She was the one lying in that cold room in Italy. And she gets treated like a footnote. Meredith was 21. She loved books, she loved sunbathing, she dreamed about her future. Her friends describe her as funny, kind, grounded. She had a family who adored her, who had to bury their daughter after watching her name get swallowed by scandal. And still, even in recent interviews, her family says they're frustrated that every time her case gets dragged into the spotlight, it's Amanda's image that fills the screen. Imagine being her parents. Imagine having to fight to remind the world that your daughter was more than a backdrop in someone else's drama. Now listen. I know some of you watching this might think the story's old. It's already solved, Amanda's free, Guede was convicted, end of discussion. But no! This isn't over, because how we tell these stories matters. If all people remember is that Amanda Knox case, then we've already failed Meredith. Because the truth is, Meredith Kercher was the victim. Rudy Guede was the killer. And Amanda Knox, whether you sympathize with her or not, wasn't the one holding the knife. The thing that gets me the most? The justice system bent over backwards to protect the wrong story. Meredith deserved better. Amanda deserved better too. But most of all, the Kercher family deserved better. They deserved a clear answer. They deserved a world that remembered their daughter's smile before remembering a tabloid nickname. And that's why I'm making this video. To say her name. To tell her story. And to remind us all, behind every headline, behind every Netflix series, there's a real human being who lost everything. So here's where I want to pause and talk directly to you. Because these aren't just stories we consume. They're real lives. And if we don't learn to see past the headlines, past the sensational stuff, we're going to keep forgetting the people who matter the most. Let me break it down real simple. 1. Remember the victim. Always. 2. Question the story you're sold. The first version isn't always the truth. 3. Never forget how easily an innocent person can be crushed by the system, by the media, by public opinion. And finally, ask yourself this: if it was your sister, or your best friend, or your child, would you want their story told through the lens of someone else's? Or would you want the world to remember them for who they were, for the life they lived, not just the way it ended? Meredith Kercher's life was worth so much more than the way it got twisted in the headlines. And if there's anything we can do now, it's to say her name, share her story, and not let her vanish in the shadow of a true crime spectacle. So if you're still here, if you felt something while listening to this, do one thing for me. Like this video so it reaches more people. Subscribe if you want me to keep making content that cuts through the noise and tells the stories in a way that matters. And drop a comment. Tell me how this story made you feel. Because it isn't just my channel. It's our community. And if we remember Meredith Kercher together, if we say her name, share her truth, then maybe, just maybe, she won't be forgotten.